Um, okay, we're live. Hello, everybody. Uh, I should send out a tweet. Sure. Do you want to talk about ship stuff? Yeah. Oh wait. No. I'm sorry. That was awkward. Because I've been sitting here like listening to you talk, but then I realized they can't hear you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everybody. I have to fix the plugin. The plugin's being a poopy head right now. Give me a second. Um, okay. I think that should work now.
Can everybody hear me?
Okay, cool. There we go.
Good.
I'm sorry. I just looked at the output and I was like, wait a second.
This is very funny because this happens often. And I like that I get to do my whole spiel and then Andrew's like, wait, nobody heard the whole thing.
Yeah. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job too.
I appreciate
it. You know what? I found out why the plugin doesn't work. And I didn't do it this time, and it still didn't work. So apparently I don't understand why it doesn't work.
Damn it. Stupid plugin. Anyways, should I start again?
Yeah. Sorry.
So a few things. I haven't been here for 2 weeks. In that time, they announced that Odessa area ports had exported more grain year over year than the year before, which is excellent. We love to see exports coming in and out. In that time, I also announced that Odessa area ports are not just exporting grain. They are A, exporting a lot of other things, and B, they're actually importing things. We are watching ships go in with cargo and be unloaded and then actually fill back up with other cargoes. And so it's a two-way street. This is great. This is like just one more kind of check mark of this is like a fully functioning port system, and that's exactly what we want to see. So amazing, awesome things for Ukraine's economy, and I expect that to keep functioning the way it is. There was also, I put it in my thread, I think it was last night, an interview with the Russian ambassador to the UK, where he specifically mentioned, he was asked about the Ukrainian corridor, and he specifically, his answer was, well, let them use it, as if Russia really doesn't give a hoot whether or not Ukraine is going back and forth with imports and exports out of Odessa. This is kind of the messaging I have always expected to hear from Russia, because it's just not that feasible for them to piss around with all that. And they have too many of their friends and allies that export out of Ukraine. Some that you probably would not expect and don't realize are exporting out of Ukraine right now. So all of those things are really great. They're good information about Ukagor. However, the more interesting thing that happened was down in the southern part of the Black Sea. I think it was 3 days ago. The Russian MOD said specifically that they had repelled an attack on civilian cargo ships by Ukrainian USVs. We know that Ukraine doesn't actually attack civilian cargo ships. However, we do know that Russia contracts civilian cargo ships, very specific civilian cargo ships, to go back and forth between Syria and a couple of other places, delivering grain they've stolen from Ukraine and delivering jet fuel to their operations in Syria, and sometimes bringing cargoes back from Syria. And so when I will be honest that I didn't pay all that much attention to that report when it first came out, because I misread it and I thought it happened on the 10th, and it actually happened on the evening of the 9th. And on the 10th, the seas were a little bit high for that. It's not when I would have expected it to happen. However, on the 9th, the seas were actually exactly what you would kind of hope they were for a USV attack. And if you looked at any of the ship tracks for any of those ships that the Russian MOD contracts, they happened to be sailing through the southern part of the Black Sea during the time that that attack supposedly occurred. And they all disappeared off AIS for that transit time, and then they came back up all within a fairly small stretch of time in the northern Bosphorus anchorage area, and then transited out. So if the attack happened, which seems probable, but we don't really have a lot of evidence other than that circumstantial evidence. But if it happened, then it doesn't look like it was productive. Yorick was able to get pictures of all of those ships transiting through the Bosphorus, and there wasn't any visible damage on any of them. But it does show that Ukraine is kind of up and going with their USV attacks again. And I would suggest that you should keep watching the weather, because tomorrow, for instance, there's supposed to be a lot of fog over the Black Sea. You never know what could happen in a really low visibility situation. So it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I assume this fog comes from warm weather.
This fog comes from so much warm weather that also is bringing rain with it, and mud, and a lot of melting ice and snow. And how's the front line doing, Andrew?
Oh, we got to see a video of a Ukrainian tank pulling a Krynky out of very thick mud today, so that was cool.
Sure bet you did.
I kind of wish I had that video handy. I didn't think to save it. I bet most people have seen it already, though. But yeah, boy, has that front line been fronting, you know. I just want to say that there's like no good news. Okay, so if you're here for good news, I don't got much on the good news front. I think the good news to me is that Russia didn't accomplish its goals for the winter. Now, they never gave us a battle plan, but we kind of know what their battle plan was because of the materials they published when the offensive started really strongly hinted at what their battle plan was. I guess I could remind you of what they were saying. They said, remember back then the front line was basically like this here, this kind of road ridge. So they said when the offensive started that on the first day they had reached Berdichi, and that they were storming Sevierna. And so at the end of the first day of the offensive, they said that they had captured half of Berdichi and that they were storming Sevierna. So if you look at that, if that were true, if they had captured Berdichi, they would be on the way to cutting off the northern flank of Avdiivka. And if you are assaulting Sevierna, you'd be on the path of capturing this road into Avdiivka. So if both of those were true, there would only be this one road left, And the implication is that if Russia had actually captured these two towns in the first day or two, that they would then continue pushing towards Orlivka from the north and south, and then Avdiivka would fall probably within a few days. So that this was the plan that they were telling us from the beginning, that Avdiivka would fall in the first few days, and then what? Obviously, Avdiivka was not the goal of their offensive. Now, it seems to me, I'm just using kind of logic, that the actual goal of their offensive was Krakow. Um, that they wanted to capture Mariinka, which they did. They wanted to take Avdiivka, which they're probably about to, but they want to do that in the first few days, and they wanted to link up these two forces and continue west. And I believe their primary goal was to capture Krakow. Um, their secondary goal was to take Konstantinivka, and then with these two strongholds, that they would take Vuhledar, and with that, they would basically take the entire southern portion of Donbass. Um, that I think this was basically their goal of the offensive. And so far, they've never even reached Berdichi. They can't even get Stepova, although in their plan they said that they were bypassing Stepova, which never happened. Um, they never got Sevierna. They're still working on Avdiivka, which it might fall soon, but they did capture Mariinka. They are entering street combat in Mykolaiivka. They never got to Konstantinivka. They never got to Krakow, not even close to Krakow. Um, and Vuhledar is still firmly in Ukrainian hands. So I think the positive here is that the Russian offensive largely failed. Um, but on the flip side, there are massive successes. So um, uh, Avdiivka is in very significant trouble at this point. It appears to me that Ukraine should withdraw, preferably as soon as possible. Um, in the northern part of the city, or the middle, or whatever you want to call this, the kind of anyway, I'm going to call it the northern part of the city. Russia has crossed the railway, and they're pushing towards this last paved road into the city. So this road here from Orlivka, this is the last paved road into the city. Um, so this here is a dirt road, and they're pushing towards that from kind of this whole region. They're just pushing west. Ukraine is counterattacking. We had video from the 3rd Assault Brigade attacking here in a Max Pro. They were hit by, or a near miss by a mortar shell, among other sorts of shells. But anyways, there's Ukraine is counterattacking here, trying to stabilize and push back Russia from this last paved road. Um, every road into Avdiivka is more or less under fire control. This paved road practically has combat on it. This dirt road is being attacked like from every angle with artillery, drones, etc., and airstrikes and whatever. So yeah, it's all not great. The most dangerous places to be would be Zenit, where they're getting closed on from two sides basically. Um, and this southeastern part of the city, which is the last place I would want to be personally. Um, yeah, so it's hard to tell exactly what is going on with the degree of control. Some people are saying that Russia has pushed all the way to this highway here, and that they control this entire region. I haven't really seen proof of that. Maybe they have, but I haven't seen proof of it. Certainly, there is combat going on in this area here. Um, so I don't know. I don't know, dude. It's all very not good. Russia is advancing from the south going north, not terribly quickly, but they are advancing, and they don't have to go very far. And Zenit, man, Zenit is not in a good position. They're being pressed on both sides. I don't even know how you'd get out of Zenit. Um, there's no road out. The only way is to cross these fields, and the fields are definitely in fire control. Um, and people are asking, why isn't Ukraine pulling out? Um, and we were just having a conversation about why you wouldn't pull out of Avdiivka, and it comes down to time. Like, how important is time to Ukraine right now? Do they do they have to buy time for something else? To set up defenses. I would hope they don't have to buy time to set up defenses, but maybe they do. Maybe they have to buy time to set up defenses. Maybe they have to buy time for something else to occur, that may have nothing to do with Avdiivka. Maybe there is something somewhere else that they're waiting for, that they need Avdiivka to keep going until that event happens. Now, I don't know what that event would be. Maybe maybe they maybe it's like Novomikhailivka, or I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know what it could be, but maybe there's some event that they need to wait to happen, and they're willing to take the losses in Avdiivka in order to wait for that event. Um, and there's also the possibility that they're just stupid. Maybe it's just a political game. There's any reason for holding Avdiivka is opaque to me. To me, I can't understand why you would hold Avdiivka, or why you would hold on to it. I would vastly prefer if like maybe you hold on to the coke plant, and withdraw, and kind of defend this here. It's just like cut off the neck here, and let the city fall, and set up your defensive line there. Um, I don't know how realistic that is of a defensive line. You may have to fall back further and further. I'm sure that Ukraine will slowly fall back, to whatever defensive line they prefer. Um, it could fall all the way to these kind of ponds or lakes or whatever they are, like Orlivka, Karlivka. Orlivka could be a defensive position here, because you have these kind of water ways, all these ponds interlocking, and these are pretty built up areas. There are defenses there that have been there for a while. So yeah, I don't know, dude.
Andrew,
Yeah.
uh, is there a reasonable possibility that they could be trying to delay the pullout so that Putin didn't have a positive win right before his election?
I really don't think so. I mean, if you're using that as a reason, that I think that's kind of absurd. I don't think the Ukrainian people care about Avdiivka, and I don't think the Russian people care about Avdiivka. I don't think anyone cares about Avdiivka. Like, okay, let's put it this way. When Russia captured Bakhmut, like, the Russian media never even covered it, because the Russian people didn't care. Most Russians can't even tell you what Bakhmut is. And Avdiivka is even smaller than Bakhmut. It's like they don't care. Their media may not even cover it. So, like, would capturing it benefit Putin? I really doubt it. Would Ukraine holding on to it hurt Putin? Like, no. Like, I don't know, dude. Like the media coverage of Bakhmut was laughable. It was like, on all of the Russian media, like, they had like a one sentence blurb that, like, we captured Bakhmut, And that was it. Like if you look at like the frontline news, there's like this story, that story, this story, that story. We captured Bakhmut. This story, that story, this story, that story. You know, like no one cared. Not even the news cared. Not even the propaganda cared. Nobody cared. And Avdiivka is even less. So I don't think so. And I don't think the Ukrainian people care about Avdiivka either. I every time I talk to Ukrainians, I ask them their opinion on Avdiivka. I've yet to really find anyone who cared. You know what they all say? They all say we care about the lives of the soldiers. That's what they all say, something along those lines, that we want the soldiers to be okay. Whether it's defending the city or leaving the city, we just want the soldiers to be okay. So I don't think anyone really cares about Avdiivka outside of the bubble of like the tiny minority of people following the war very closely. I don't think anyone even knows the city exists.
I have a question from the audience, if you'd like it, about Avdiivka.
Sure.
So the question is, and this is kind of a softball for you, but what's to stop Russia from just breaking through all the way west if Ukraine doesn't have enough artillery and they take Avdiivka? Is this the end of things? Are we at the Dnipro in a month? I'm being a little dramatic here, but what's your perspective?
I don't think so. I think one thing that Russia has shown to be really bad at, it's crossing these big fields. Especially big fields where the town is well defended. So because like with Stepova, for example, like if you can cross this big field into Stepova and you take a ton of casualties crossing it, but you can get in, you can drop off infantry. But once the infantry's there, they lose their vehicle support because the vehicles can't, they either have to immediately leave or they get destroyed. So they lose their vehicle support and they're just infantry on their own. They're really difficult to resupply. You can resupply them, but you take a ton of casualties doing it. And it's hard to like the medevac for the same reason. So the infantry get stuck here where they can't build up the power to push forward. Every time they go forward, they take big risks and they end up overexposing them or overextending themselves, and then they get beaten back by whatever forces. Whether Ukraine can push vehicles in because Ukraine can get vehicles here a lot easier than Russia can, or they get beaten back by drone attacks, or maybe Ukrainian infantry gets pushed in. So like this sort of town like Stepova it's really difficult for Russia. It plays into the strengths of Ukraine, where Ukraine can use their longer range weapons like drones to keep Russia at like arm's length. All the towns that are in this kind of general situation where you have to cross a big field to get there, and then once you cross the field, you have to engage in difficult combat with a few reinforcements and few resources. Every time this happens, Russia has a big problem, and that Russia has a problem until they build a legitimate foothold that they can resupply, and then then the Ukraine has to withdraw to the next position. Um, a lot of the towns here behind Avdiivka are going to have this same problem. Like Sevierna has these huge fields around it that Ukraine can use their longer range weapons to defend. And once you reach Sevierna, it's difficult to hold, and there's these supply routes that Ukraine can use to maintain Sevierna, like from Tonenka or whatever. The Anyway, a lot of these towns here all are in that same sort of general situation where it's more difficult for Russia to attack. It plays into the Ukrainian strengths. Pervomaiska was like this for a long time, but it's starting to collapse. I think it's collapsing in large part because there's just been so much fighting in this southern portion that I think it's just kind of like every building's gone, every basement is gone. It's just you can't really hold it anymore. There's the western part of the town, or the northern part of this town, hasn't had anywhere near the degree of combat. So Russia's still gonna have to push through this northern part, but this southern part is just really difficult to hold on to. Novelska is another town that Russia can't really approach because they have to cross these giant fields. And anyway, so these giant fields are really the strength of Ukraine. Novomykhailivka, um, Ukraine very valiantly defended this town for a very long time, but it's been under such air threat. It's been getting hit by so many bombs. Like they've been dropping like dozens and dozens of bombs per day for months, like 5 6 months, like at least since the beginning of September. Some of those days they were dropping like 80 plus bombs a day, like for weeks at a time. So this town is just deleted, and it's getting increasingly difficult to defend the eastern portion of the town because it's just all gone, and Russia can just dump truck bodies here. But the western part of the town isn't anywhere near as destroyed, so it may hold out longer. Um, anyways, all these fields to the south as well, especially getting closer to Vodiana and to this highway in general. Um, this is all in that same sort of category where it's harder for Russia to advance. Now there are some rumors that we haven't had video confirmation of it, but there are rumors that Russia has actually advanced to these positions here, but we haven't had video, so I haven't marked it. But I marked it as a gray area. Yeah, and Pobieda has been under basically constant assault for 2 years now, with basically no progress. So Russia's going to have a really difficult time advancing. They're going to take a lot of casualties advancing still. And we don't know how many casualties they're capable of absorbing at this point, because they've taken so many. And I don't mean casualties of infantry, I mean casualties of vehicles. If they're forced to cross these fields purely with infantry, it might get kind of amusing, because Ukraine does have a lot of ways of dealing with infantry at long distances. At short distances, it's more difficult, but at long distances, Ukraine does have cluster munitions. They do have drones, drone drop grenades, etc. We've seen a lot of just infantry assaults around Klashivka, where these infantry assaults have had minimal success with enormous casualties. So I think Klashivka could be your kind of example of what happens when Russia has no vehicles to work with. And the answer is they advance a few hundred meters after getting pulverized for months at a time. So it's not something to write home about. It's not really a big success story for the Russians.
Thank you. Do you see that, in your estimation, what was the point where it would have made most sense to start pulling out of Avdiivka? And is that the same point when loss ratios start to change, or was there something else that would make you say now's the time to go?
Well, the way I view Avdiivka is probably different than the way they view Avdiivka. But the way that I view Avdiivka is that, to me, the value of the city was that you could control this section of the line with very few men. And this was like, you have to really dial back time, because like back when Ukraine like controlled like Novoselivka, Druha, and Kamyanka, like when they controlled this line up here, which was a very long time ago, but when they controlled this line, you could defend this area with very, very few men, which is kind of like what we see around like New York and Pivniana and Shumi, like all these areas. You can defend all this area with very few men, which means that you can take the men and do something else with them, right? So Avdiivka, that was kind of the value that you had here, is that these defensive lines that they had up front were really, really strong. And Russia only got through them by like gimmicks. Like they never actually fought through them. Like they dug a hole under one line and like blew it up with like a mine, and then they found like a tunnel that like went through a reservoir. So there were like two weird gimmicks to get through these defensive lines. So Russia never actually defeated these lines, but that's another story. But being able to defend this, because for a long time, Ukraine was defending this entire area with two brigades, right? They changed out the brigades a few times, but it was largely two brigades defending this whole area. And this front, when it started, was an enormous front for two brigades, and it's kind of whittled down over time because as Russia has advanced, you need more and more men per kilometer to hold it, and as they like close this neck, it's going to take even more and more men to defend this land. So the amount of people it takes to hold Avdiivka is just skyrocketing, and it's going against the value. Like, does that make sense? Like, instead of using fewer men to hold this ground, you're using way more men, and not only that, but now you have to bring in some of your best brigades, like literally your best brigade to hold this northern part of Avdiivka, plus other really good brigades to hold the northern flank, etc. So, to me, when they lost these defenses in the south, and it started to take more and more men to defend, that's when I would have withdrawn. But Ukraine may be waiting for something. Like, there may be some thing that they need to buy time for, and they're afraid that if they just withdraw from Avdiivka, then Russia will take advantage of that time to advance in this area or something like that. I'm not really sure why. But I would have withdrawn when they lost the south. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. When you're talking about an army that has a lack of men generally, it doesn't seem like a very wise position to continue holding ground that requires exponential amount of men to hold.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because you're going to be taking increasingly more casualties. Because you're getting into more and more dangerous sorts of combat. Like, it's way safer to sit in a trench and shell each other than it is to get into hand-to-hand combat.
Do we know how many civilians are still there?
I don't know an exact number, but I would guess around 1,000.
I think we're actually a little under 900 at this point. They briefly picked up evacuation. It was at 950. And at that point, I mean, there's also a number of people in that quantity who are likely dead and just,
Yeah.
Aren't answering or whatnot.
Yeah, a whole
So
bunch.
I'd say, if I was a betting man, I'd say the true civilian population is less than 750 people.
I don't know. But yeah, there's a few were killed today. There was I think a rocket strike on a shelter today. It collapsed the shelter. I think one guy is confirmed dead, and 2 women are missing. And there's no like emergency workers who can help them, so they're presumed dead at this point.
So if Ukraine does decide to withdraw, is the only road out currently the one that goes straight west?
Well, we are assuming that the third is setting up some sort of perimeter around this paved road to the north with the purpose of keeping the road open so that people can go through the road. I don't know which direction. I hope they're leaving on the road, but I guess you could come enter the road too. And this road that just goes straight west into Sevierna, that road exists, and I guess you could cross these. There's probably roads through these fields too, like but yeah, there aren't many options. Zenit is in particularly bad position. There's basically no roads to Zenit. You have to cross the field, and not just one field. You have to cross 2 fields under attack the entire time. So I don't even know what's going to happen to Zenit.
Assume that the Russians have laid mines through there as well? Question mark?
Everyone's laid mines.
Yeah.
There's a lot of minefields in this area that are they were never marked because they were laid really early in the war, and many of them were laid by like Russian militias that they weren't really trained in how to lay minefields. They just kind of like threw mines on the ground, and they've been there for so long that now they're like covered with dirt and nobody has any clue where they are. So you can just get a little surprise if you drive. And Ukraine laid some unmarked minefields too, for pretty much the same reason. And then afterwards, they started bringing in more professional people, and they laid marked minefields. So you have like Russian minefields that are unmarked, you have Ukrainian ones that are unmarked, and then you have Russian ones that are marked, and then Ukrainian ones that are marked too, and they're all basically on top of each other, and nobody knows where any of the mines are. This is probably one of the most heavily mined areas in Europe. Right here.
I want to say the border here, so not in Avdiivka itself and the areas that we've seen since 22, but prior to that, specifically around Donetsk and a little bit west, it was the second most mined area in the world after the Korean DMZ. So I think the Russians are just expanding on their own existing structure. With that being said, because from a medical standpoint, we've seen a tremendous number of casualties here on the Ukrainian side have been mine related or FPV drone related, mostly to the extremities. What's the role of mines on both the Russian and Ukrainian side around Avdiivka?
Well, they were playing a really big part in defending Zenit. The southern approaches to Apitna and Bodiana were really heavily mined. All of this area between the highway and the airfield, this was all really heavily mined. So a lot of the most mined areas are now under Russian control and have been for a while, and they've cleared paths through them. So some of the most heavily mined areas have been, they at least have like paths through them at this point. These fields here are mined north of Zenit. That like I don't know if that's going to help or hurt Ukraine. I assume Ukraine has marked paths through these fields because they've had to use them to supply Zenit. That's an assumption. No, I don't know, dude. But and to the north up here, especially this area here is an incredibly dense minefield. Now, like north of Bakhmutivka, this is all an incredibly dense minefield. Now, this is guarding the northern flank of Avdiivka, because if you imagine, say that you were an enterprising young Ukrainian officer who loves monkeys and breaching with them, you could monkey breach into through this incredibly dense minefield into the Novobakhmutivka, and if you are insane enough, you could continue monkey breaching into Novoselivka Druha and cut off this highway. That would take a level of lunacy that I'm not sure the world is ready for. But it would require crossing one of the densest minefields I've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen the footage of this minefield, but I have. I've seen drone footage, and it's crazy dense. It's more of a bomb. It's less of a minefield and more of a bomb. It's a giant bomb. So yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else to say about Avdiivka? The question is, what is monkey breach? Do you want to answer what monkey breach is? I guess I could.
I definitely don't. Language.
So think about there's a minefield and you want to breach through it, and then you take the equivalent of 1,000 monkeys on typewriters, and then after they slam their shit covered fingers into the typewriters, that's your plan. That's a monkey breach. When you have a monkey going ooh ah and just single minded breach with the monkey brain, that is a monkey breach. It usually doesn't end well.
Monkey
Does that
breach.
more or less cover it?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, so I think I've said all I really know how to say around this area, because we've talked about Avdiivka, we've talked a bit about Mariinka, we've talked about Novomykolaivka, and the southern part. I don't really have much to say about Robotyne. There was a very large assault here. I don't know what day it was. The video came out yesterday, so let's just say it was yesterday. Where the 65th Brigade defended two large Russian assaults. One basically just went east and ended here when they just ran face first into a brick wall and broke their nose. That's pretty much what happened. This infantry dismounted. They tried to hide, and then Ukraine hit them with just every single cluster munition, just all of them at the same time. And I don't know how many of these guys survived, to be honest. And this one to the north, they did a little bit of an attack here, where this is how it ended. It ended with the Russians having their hands tied and being taken away as POWs, and they lost an MTLB too. So both of these assaults ended in failure, and the full videos of these came out today, and I watched some of it. they're they're 20 minutes long each. I think I watched 30 minutes of it on 2x speed, and there's still like another hour for me to go. I didn't watch it all yet, but anyways, it's basically they crossed the field, dismounted, and got massacred. So that's basically what happened in both of those places. Um, Today there was a Ukrainian helicopter got shot down. There was I think I reversed them. I reversed which dot is which dot, but they shot a manpad here. Maybe it's not a manpad. Isn't this kind of long range for a manpad? What's this range? It's kind of long range for a manpad, don't you think? Do they have like a 6 kilometer range manpad? Anyways, they shot a manpad from right here, and it shot down a helicopter right over there. Um, you can see in the images, etc., that it was hit in the air and then crashed and exploded. And that was right here. Anyways, so that's kind of all I have to say about Robotyne. There's not been terribly much changing there recently, and in the Krynky area, there's been a lot of news that Ukraine's been advancing in very small numbers. I don't really see evidence of advancing. There was this flag hoisted on top of this water tower. Um, I don't really put much stock in flags, especially since they started dropping flags with drones, you know. But there's a flag on the water tower. It appears that this whole area here has been cleared of Russians. I don't know how much more has been cleared. But yeah, so this kind of Krynky area is Russia's kind of losing control over the area, which is kind of funny because they've thrown so many resources here to push Ukraine out, and it just has not worked at all. But anyway, I don't really have anything else to say about that. So the next story is the north of Bakhmut, or I guess all of Bakhmut. Oof. Um, Recently, including yesterday, we got video of Russians moving up and clearing these positions of Ukrainian soldiers. So they've they've captured this area to the east of Klashivka. I'm not really sure how important that is, but it's it's true apparently. And but more specifically, they've been assaulting Ivanivska pretty strongly. Now, I don't know, language. Have you read about these assaults? Because there's been a lot of people talking about it.
So what I had been told is that VDV forces, or of some kind, whether it's VDV or not, more competent Russian soldiers were brought to bear, as well as a alarmingly high number of drones, specifically FPV drones or dive bomber drones, what have you. And as a consequence, they were able to successfully push the Ukrainians out of a couple areas. There's also been artillery as per usual, but the two that really spoke out were these troops are better trained, better, I don't know if they're better equipped, but they seem to have better morale and better tactics, so they can exploit after they blow the hell out of us with a bunch of drones. And as we get degraded and we lose ammo and people, we have to pull back.
So, yeah, from what I've heard, they've been pushing forward with groups of like 3 vehicles at a time near Ivanivska. Now, I assume that they're attacking across these fields because I don't know how else you would attack Ivanivska unless you consider this Ivanivska. Anyway, but they've been attacking in groups of like 3 vehicles, with each vehicle like full of infantry, and by full of I mean riding on top. So 3 vehicles could probably carry you up to 60 infantry, probably. Probably not that many in actuality, but that's probably the upper end of how many they could carry. It could be more like 20. It depends on how many people you're willing to put in your vehicles. So, but they've been attacking with about 3 vehicles at a time. And what's kind of funny is that it appears that they've been attacking with either 3 BMPs or 3 tanks, and they don't mix them, which is weird. But whatever. I think more typically you would bring like 2 tanks and the BMP or something like that, but they just do 3. But anyway, so they've been attacking, and around Ivanivska. And I'm not sure exactly where they're attacking. They could be attacking across this field, across that field, up this road, or here, I guess, or anywhere in between. But I have no specifics. But they've been trying to attack, and they've been losing vehicles, and not moving up apparently. To the north of Ivanivska, near Hramova, they've had more success. Now, the news I saw today. Now, who read this? I think it was Officer, or I think it was Officer who wrote this, but he was complaining that the lines, not the front lines, because the front lines are basically lost, but the more rear lines where they're actually defending now, that all of these trenches are 100% dirt and wood. There's no concrete at all, and very little overhead cover. And he was basically saying like, what have we been up to? We've been here for like 2 years, and the best we have are our trench is just a hole in the ground with like we need cover from the drones. I don't know, have you did you see anything like that?
I personally hadn't followed that as much. That's been an issue though, just sort of consistently in, I would argue, almost every area of the front outside of the Ukraine defenses towards Belarus and the Russian defenses at the Surovikin line. I mean, in Ukraine, I saw a whopping 3 trenches out of easily 100 that had any reinforcement in them whatsoever. I'm talking about just like having walls versus, just a logs with some a plastic tarp on top of it, some soil and some, more logs. That's the standard. And by everything I've seen from the Russian side, including abandoned Russian trenches from several months ago, a year ago now, there's not really any change there either. The average trench in Ukraine is very, very meager and is not reinforced, at least not to my knowledge.
Well, it's getting more and more deadly to be in a trench that is not reinforced, because you're just getting pelted by drones. So basically, what they're doing to attack here is that you send in a whole load of drones, just like every drone you have, just all the drones. You send them in. You pound it with bombs. You can drop your bombs. You have FPV drones that can, fly in and blow up. So anyway, you bring in your drones. You pound the trenches until you get rid of every every strong point in the trench, like every little bunker, everywhere with overhead cover, etc. So you destroy the trench that way with your drones. Once it's destroyed, you can send in a wave of your lesser infantry to test out the waters to see if you're ready to go. If they can get a foothold, then you can send in your higher quality infantry to capture the position. If your weaker infantry get demolished, then you just send in more drones and repeat the process until it's weak enough to capture. And that's pretty much what's going on here. Just each area is getting systematically destroyed by drones. Generally speaking, we've seen that drones has changed trench warfare, and that it's made trench warfare much more dangerous. Because you basically just have way more basically precision weapons now than ever before. Whereas before you would need a laser guided munition or maybe GPS guided or something like that. Now you just have a cheap little drone and you can drop all of these really accurate bombs and whatever all day, every day, basically. In all weather, at night, Ukraine has the Baba Yagas, which do tremendous damage, dropping very, very big bombs. Russia doesn't really have that, but they do have tons of drones too. So trench warfare is going to have to change. And part of that change is going to have to be overhead cover. And that overhead cover is going to have to be way better than the standard is now. The standard now for overhead cover is it's optional, apparently. Whereas in the future, maybe overhead cover needs to be reinforced concrete, like across the board, Oh, don't lose hope for Ukraine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. A lot of people have been losing hope recently. People see everything that's been going on, and they're getting. You see it everywhere. Everywhere, people are losing hope. Now, this year is not fun. This year is going to be really bad, and we kind of saw it coming. I mean, to be honest, like the summer offensive was a disaster, and we all know that. We don't need to go through it again. But and that summer offensive made this year worse, for sure. Like that's like it's not debatable. It's just a fact. Like but you can take that for what it is. This year is going to be bad. But that doesn't mean next year is going to be bad. It doesn't mean everything's over. It's just that this war ended up being longer than anyone ever wanted it to be. It's longer than Russia ever wanted it to be, for sure. And it's longer than Ukraine ever. And Ukraine never wanted a war in the first place. So this war is lasting longer than everybody wanted. It's some people are taking it as an inconvenience. That they're like, it's I just want to go back to the way it used to be. Well, guess what? You're never going back to the way it used to be. Time only moves forward. There's no going backwards. So you have to get over it. There's no going back. Okay, so whatever your life was like 3 years ago, you're never gonna have that back. So just get over it. And you know, a lot of countries in Europe, they're not taking things seriously, especially like France and Italy and whatever. But like, you know, you can deal with it. You can deal with that. You know, we can move on and live in a world where France doesn't do anything. It's fine. You know, there's enough other countries out there who are pulling their own weight that it would be fine. Like the UK is their manufacturing capacity is growing way faster than I think anyone realizes. I don't think people understand how much manufacturing capacity the UK has because they haven't unleashed it yet because they have some technical issues in the way they manufacture things, but all that stuff will be sorted out and it'll be okay. You know, Germany is increasing their capacity, and in turn, Germany is increasing the capacity of other countries like Spain, etc. Because Rheinmetall has factories in various countries all over, so they're increasing the capacity of those countries by way of Germany, and all of the Nordic countries are expanding, and Finland too, which isn't Nordic but it's close enough, and things are going to be okay. It's just that we're going through a weird growth phase where everything and yeah, like the phase we're going to right now is largely powered by or largely responsible by or due to the inaction of the United States and the Congress kind of falling on its face. But even that was predictable. We all knew you couldn't rely on the U.S. Congress forever. It's unreasonable. Like this is why you should probably pass like multi-year bills like up front, which is what a lot of countries are doing. Like Germany passed like a 5-year plan or whatever. So you don't need to lose hope. We've talked about this so much today, like in our channels about the hope. We like just before we were talking about the Russian manufacturing capacity of their vehicles, how Russia has like doubled or maybe tripled the number of vehicles they're capable of manufacturing, and also how many they're able to bring out of storage. I think they doubled their manufacturing and tripled how many they pull out of storage, which is a lot. Like they're bringing a lot more vehicles to battle now than they were. But the issue for them is that even after doing that improvement, which it took them all of their resources to figure that out, how to do that, because that's a big change. Like making double the number of vehicles and pulling out 3 times as many from storage, like that's a big change. That took a lot of resources for them to do, and even that is only a fraction of how many vehicles they're losing per month. They're going to have to probably go up at least like 3 times more vehicles per month to start to get break even, maybe 4 or 5 times more, depends on what month you're looking at and whose numbers you believe. So and then you look at the shell production numbers from Russia, where they're predicted to plateau how many shells they're producing per year. Sometime this year or next year, they're going to plateau, and in order to produce more, they're going to have to get more raw materials, and it could take years to set up those supply lines of raw materials, and they'll also have to build all new factories and get all new tooling and train all the people to do all those things. And it's not only factories for the shells, but it's factories for all of the raw materials in addition to it. So that is a real plateau that they'll be running up against. It'll take years to to go through, you know.
Would you like to talk about the actual statistics and, when those statistics were taken, sort of the months that we're looking at here? Because this isn't this matter of, at some point in the year 2027, Russia might run out of things. Like, there's good quantifiable evidence in terms of their tanks, their armored vehicles, and their artillery systems, which I would say are arguably the most important for Russian movement on the ground. And those are lifespans that are being measured in months, not decades. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, so regarding the numbers, I don't have like the stuff in front of me right now, but when you go through and count the losses, or okay, so if you go through and count the storage that Russia has, okay, so you go through and count like how many tanks they have in storage, how many like artillery pieces, etc. You need high resolution imagery to do that, like at least 50 centimeter resolution, if not better. Maybe if you're really stretching it, a 70 centimeter resolution, but you really kind of want 30 centimeters. See, the problem here is that those resolutions do exist for the areas that you need in order to count the vehicles in storage. But the problem is that you can only buy images that are in the archive, and the images in the archive are basically images that someone else has already bought. So you're at the whim of what other people are purchasing, which means that for a lot of these areas, there's like one image per year for these places, and some of those places, the most recent image is like March of 2022. Or and I know this because I was going through like looking to see if I could find new images of these places. So it's like March of 2022 or like August of 2023. Like so that's how far back in time you have to go to get the high res images to do this counting in the first place. So when you see people go through and count this stuff, you have to keep that in mind, that you're counting what happened back in time. It's kind of like, when you look into the sky and you look at stars, you're not looking at the star now. You're looking at the star how it was like thousands of years ago. That's kind of like what we're doing with these stockpiles. So when it says that like Russia has withdrawn X number of vehicles, you have to realize that some of the stockpiles, I'm sure we have like brand new images from, like maybe they're from December or something. Like some of them I'm sure are brand new images, but a whole bunch of them, they could be 8 months old, a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, So you just have to keep that in mind. And when you look at the numbers are really the best case scenario for Russia. And in reality, they've probably pulled out a lot more since then. Another thing is that they keep vehicles in storage in various different places of storage. So there's the vehicles that you can see in the image, and then there's vehicles that are hidden because they're like in a building or whatever. So you can't count those. So, and as time passes, like they use the ones that are outside first, and then they pull the ones that are inside to put them outside, and et cetera, et cetera. So the numbers can go up. So you could count, 100 things in this place, and then come back and count it a year later, and there could be 150. But that doesn't mean that there's 50 more. It could be that the first 100 disappeared, and the new 150 were pulled out of a building. You know what I mean? So it's all kind of there's caveats. There's caveats to the analysis. We don't have up-to-date information on what's in their storage. And we don't have perfect information on anything. So we can't really accurately predict when they'll run out of any given thing. But we do know that the trends are not in their favor. And the exact timeline depends on so many things. Their burn rate on vehicles in the past 5 months since October has been dramatically higher than it was in the months prior. Maybe at some point maybe tomorrow, I don't know, dude, but maybe I'll post something on like the month by month burn rate of their vehicles, because we have stats that I think are pretty good from September till now, and you can see the burn rate on the vehicles. It's gone up. Spoiler. It went from like 3 per month to like 5 per month on their tanks, or not per month. 3 per day to 5 per day on their tanks. Is how many they're losing. Now that's not great. And keep in mind that they're manufacturing, or not manufacturing, but they're bringing to battle like maybe 40 a month. So if they're losing like 5 a day, and the numbers don't work out in their favor. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
It's just, and I know you and I talk a lot, sort of more privately, and it's been a long time since I've been up here on one of your, podcast broadcasts. But I imagine, the same things you say in private, same things you say in public, and it can be very depressing, right? We focus on negative aspects of this war because we're being realistic about it. I think Andrew and I have butted heads on a number of things a number of times, and we'll keep doing it in the future. I don't think there's ever been a time where either of us said the other was, you're being, delusional. You're being too positive, because there is the risk of that, where people say like, oh, everything is great, everything is fantastic. The Black Sea Fleet will be gone tomorrow, and Russia will march right into Crimea by the summer. It's ludicrous. And the issue is not so much saying, oh my God, everything is lost, or that you're not allowed to have positive sentiment, but you have to keep a moderated perspective on this. Because if you believe that the sky is all rainbows and butterflies, and then reality comes knocking and it's raining, that's going to crush your spirit. You're going to feel very demoralized. It's going to put you in a state of depression, frankly. Versus if you say, hey, this is a war against nominally the second largest military power in the world, and it sucks, and it's, very rough and challenging in a lot of ways, and there's not enough resources and all these things. But we're still seeing these trends that are positive. We're seeing that Russia, with all of its forces, was not able to meet its military objectives in anything resembling a reasonable time frame. And we see that they're being defeated more and more, and that they're having these issues with logistics. We're seeing that Ukraine is due to receive, as they already have, longer range munitions, which allows them to push logistics hubs back for Russia. You can say, okay, this isn't perfect, the war's won tomorrow, but it is steps in the right direction. World War II took, 5 years? The Iran-Iraq War took a decade. These things, when you're dealing with industrialized modern warfare, when it's not Afghanistan or Iraq, where one side can just say, okay, we're done, right? So, you kind of have to grit your teeth and bear it, but don't get bummed out because, we've lost Avdiivka with the population of 750 people here after Russia's been technically attacking the city for a decade and has thrown, what was the agglomeration of troops here? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 and several hundred, armored vehicles and whatnot. And they still haven't been able to take it physically as of yet. And we're coming up on October 10th to October to November, November, December to January to February, coming on 4 months. And there's, from open source data, taking losses in terms of vehicles and equipment at about a ratio of 1 to 10. That's not a winning practice. So the Russians do run out eventually. It's going to take time to get there, but they're not trending in the right direction.
Yeah. There's the counterpoint here that Ukraine is also running out, which is true. Ukraine is also running out of infantry. Their vehicle situation, I don't think, is that bad. Just mostly because they don't really seem to use that many vehicles, so they can't lose as many because they're not using as many. Ukraine probably has a pretty healthy reserve of vehicles at this point. Probably not as many as they'd like, but it's not terrible. But infantry is their problem, and it's in large part due to the mobilization issue, in that Ukraine isn't mobilizing. They may begin soon, like I don't know, maybe by the end of this month they might start mobilizing, but this is going to be like 11 months late. They need to have mobilized a really long time ago so that they could train the soldiers so they would be fully trained by now when they need them, as opposed to starting the mobilization when they need them, and then it's going to take a long time to train them if they, I mean, or the other option is just don't train them.
Yeah, that's the concern. So this has been interesting. The Ukrainian parliament, one of them came out the other day and basically said, look, so you can dive into it. Mobilization was started to be initially proposed middle of last year, really publicly. This came on the heels, not because people said, oh, we need more people in the army, but actually the opposite. Ukrainian family members said, look, we want to know about demobilization because our family members have been fighting. They signed up on February 24th with, the expectation the Russians would be in Kyiv in 3 weeks. And now they've been fighting in, Bakhmut and Avdiivka for 2 years. And they're starting to wonder, how long do I do this for? When does my contract end? And that became a big sort of internal political issue in Ukraine. There was a lot of protests, frankly, more than you would expect given the state of war. And they were respectful. They weren't riots. But it was enough that the government took heed and made the statement saying, we would like to move towards a 3-year demobilization timeframe. And I believe then after that, there's 2 years before you can get called back up. Right? Because that's been a major morale point for people. There was, you can charitably call it politically incentivized reasons that people didn't push for mobilization last year. And I'll let Andrew talk more about that because I don't want to share my own opinion on it. Now we're seeing them say, okay, well, there's constitutional issues with the laws as presented, most of them surrounding basically free entry and free movement and confiscation of assets of people who don't sign up, as well as other human rights aspects for the Ukrainian constitution I don't quite pretend to understand. They said, we're hoping to get those kinks worked out by February, by the end of this month. And then we're hoping to have the bill signed by some point in March on the president's table, with mobilization actually starting in April. Now, I've seen what Ukrainian average training is, and it's not great, to put it mildly. It depends on the unit. Some get 3 months, some get, depending on the time, 2 weeks. And then it's on the receiving unit when they actually show up to get them up to snuff, right? The issue is, you've seen members of the Ukrainian Training Corps lately, and they've appointed some new people there who kind of went on this big PR bend about, look, if you sign up for the military, you're not just being sent to your deaths. We're working on this sort of longer established training protocols. We're building out this program. Usually our training was 3 months. It's been reduced to about 1 month on average. We're seeing if we can work on that. If, and this is a big if, Ukraine is able to successfully do that, I think, it will dramatically help with mobilization rates because people are going to say, oh, wow, I actually have a set date. I'll do this for no longer than 3 years. I'm going to be trained and I'm going to be equipped. Well, now I feel a lot more, I feel a lot better about it versus this sort of, well, you're in the army now, go to Avdiivka, which doesn't quite motivate people. So all these things come to a head at some point. I think the government is going to kind of waffle on it for at least another couple weeks.
It's
because there are aspects of it that are unpopular. Especially the lowering of the age bracket.
You can't. Some of these combat units are so low on infantry that they are desperate. It's really bad. They need men immediately. And a lot of them, thousands and thousands. So I just, man, it just makes you wonder if the first wave of mobilization is just going to go straight to the front line. And maybe the second wave will be get to training. I don't, man, the longer they put off, the worse it is.
So I think, have we talked about here, sort of, and some of it is because there's a lack of manpower on the front line, which is absolutely the case. The other half of it is that in the absence of demobilization or in the absence of rotations, commanders take it upon themselves to rotate troops, and then that leaves this front line undersupplied. So let's use an example. It's a company of soldiers, about 100 people made up into 3 platoons of about 30, right? Now, maybe the statement from the Ukraine government has said for X amount of trench, you need to have 2 platoons there at any one time, and you can have 1 on rotation resting for a week while the other 2 are there. And that means that we will always have an overmatch, even if Russia sends 100 of their own guys at us, as they like to do. However, people get tired, they get worn out, they don't like living in trenches, getting wounded and killed all the time. So the commander, and I saw this, they say, okay, we're going to have 1 platoon in the trench, we're going to put 1 in reserve, that's in their normal resting state, and we're going to take the 3rd one, and they're going to have 2 weeks to go, they're not going home, but they're away from the trench for a longer period of time, and then when the reserve goes in, then these guys move to the reserve, and the guys in the trench come out. So now you have half of the troops at the front line that you might need, and if Russia either gets lucky or realizes that, then when they throw 100 soldiers at you and a couple tanks and UAVs and artillery, you don't have the quantity of people you need to push them back. Because losing 3 men out of 100 is, you can suffer those losses. Losing 3 men out of 30, well, that's 10%. And if you need people to carry all of them, that's a lot. So fixing these demobilization issues, which I don't know if they'll ever be fixed, but finding ways to allow for more time off the line would have that incidental effect of actually, I suspect, allowing for better, more prepared Ukrainian defenses. Because you can put people there for longer. Because if, let's say, you have 4 platoons instead of 3, then you can still do that 2 on, 2 off rotation, but now you've got twice as many people. But until you have troops to fill those boots, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and this is one reason why I was so against an offensive. Like, even if the offensive was totally successful, Ukraine took really high casualties in the offensive. And all of those casualties were people who could have been helping, get these guys rotated out and rested. It's all those battalions and all the companies in those battalions, all of those guys, they could have been, allowing these other brigades that have been in combat for like 2 years straight to rest. And that would have benefited Ukraine so much more than, taking a few towns in Zaporizhia. That is why I was against the offensive, personally, because I just felt that the offensive was a luxury that Ukraine couldn't afford. That they couldn't afford that, and also the other side of that coin is the ammo situation. Is all that ammo that they spent on the offensive, they could be using now in defense. That's another story. Ukraine needs to be building. They have to have more brigades available than they need to man the line, so that brigades can. They don't need to be in combat for 2 years straight, and then get totally destroyed and then have to get rebuilt from scratch. Because that's happened to multiple brigades. So it's just mobilization is the big problem. So Russia has its big problem, and that is it's going to plateau on ammo production, and that plateau of ammo production is going to be maybe 3 to 4 million rounds. Like, I think it's going to be 2 point something million of 152, and then like another 1.3 million of 120. So they're gonna have that plateau of production that's going to be vastly lower than what they're using now. So their fires are going to decrease substantially unless they can continue getting ammo from like North Korea, and that production figure is including North Korea. So they would have to get these like, infusions of ammo from North Korea by buying it and not just producing more. and or from somewhere else. Like I don't know who else makes ammo. China. I don't think. Anyway, doesn't matter. So their ammo production is gonna plateau. Their vehicle production is nowhere near sufficient. So those are the problems Russia has, and one advantage they have is manpower. So they have Russia has men, but their war materials are limited. Ukraine, it has a limited ammo supply now, but that ammo supply is going to increase substantially over time. So it is likely that Ukraine will end up having more ammo than Russia by the end of this war. I think that's at least a 50% chance, or at least they're going to break even. So the ammo is in the long term in Ukraine's favor. In the short term, obviously in Russia's favor by a lot. Ukraine's vehicle production is not great, but they're also not losing as many right now. And if they play their cards right, they may have all the vehicles they need to win this war, realistically. At least with the given production that they'll have, because they do produce vehicles, and they will get more vehicles like CV90s, etc., from purchasing them from their allies, etc. So that's one thing. But Ukraine's major weakness is manpower. So that's kind of the situation now. Is Russia has the manpower, Ukraine doesn't. Russia has a short-term advantage in ammo, and Ukraine will likely have the long-term advantage. And there will be a point where these lines cross, and the balance of power may shift in Ukraine's favor. And in the meantime, the advantage is in Russia's hands, and they will likely continue attacking and advancing and sustaining these losses until that balance of power shifts. And who knows when it will shift. I'm not going to give you a date, but I think it'll be sooner than a lot of people think.
And maybe this side, sorry, I have a dog in the background. Maybe the side note to that is that quality wise, when we're talking about ammo and vehicles, Ukraine has the upside for those as well, because whatever Russia happens to be getting from North Korea and everywhere else, it doesn't seem to have the same quality standards as what we know Ukraine is getting.
That's true. That's true. They have the quality advantage. So we have some questions. What happened to the 450,000 shells that the Czechs found? I have no idea. We haven't learned more. At least I haven't learned anything. They said that Ukraine had 1 million troops. Where did they all go? Well, a lot of the troops that Ukraine has are not assault troops. They can't fight in the front. They're more rear people. What do you think of that, language learner?
What? Think about what? I'm sorry, I cut out.
All of the troops that Ukraine has that can't fight in combat. Because they've a whole bunch, right?
They have a lot. In my experience, the guys who get wounded moderately end up becoming like base staff or instructors, which can lead to issues where sometimes you have really great informed people, and other times you have the dude who's now got a bum leg and he's teaching everybody how to attack a trench. Well, maybe he's not the most qualified for that job. I saw a lot of that specifically on base, was people who had been injured or concussed or for whatever reason weren't super combat capable, and so this was like where they got shoved into, training being more of an afterthought outside of a very small core group of instructors. So that's frustrating. However, the other thing that Ukraine has been talking about, and I've seen this from, frankly, and it'll probably attract a little bit of justified hate for this, from Ukrainians who are not very engaged in the war. A common refrain that they make when people say, well, why don't you fight or whatnot, is they say, well, the economy needs to survive. And honestly, I saw that sentiment a lot from oligarchs who were basically just trying to dodge the draft. And there is credence to that, right? I mean, frankly, if the EU stopped propping up Ukraine's economy, I think all of our calculations would change pretty dramatically. And this would get much more ugly because the amount of money being spent on soldiers' salaries is a considerable portion of the Ukrainian budget, among other things. So you have to have people working. There were statements made by Zelensky's team that there could be an alternative to mobilization, to fighting, by working in a military arms production role. They didn't really get into the specifics there, what that means, where the cutoff is, what have you. But the idea being that, okay, if you're working in a factory and you're making drones, you're making artillery shells, you're repairing, tanks, what have you, you're completely off the list for mobilization because you're contributing to the war effort, and there's no reason to throw you into the front lines. I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine has good, effective public messaging. They could probably scale their production capability up in terms of raw manpower fairly quickly if they say, hey, this is the alternative to service, and by the way, everyone who's 25 is now eligible. I imagine you'd see a lot of people who are kind of waiting on the sidelines up till now saying, okay, this, whether you want to call it dodging the draft or not, I'm going to go do this instead. And that, I think, would be very beneficial to Ukraine. Beyond just things like bring the police more into the fold and other factors, because there are manpower groups that could be better utilized. But that's getting into more of my personal opinion than objective fact.
Yeah, the one thing that Ukraine needs to avoid at all costs is making sweeping promises. It's like if you're gonna say, like, if you work for a factory, we'll never draft you, you gotta put like a time limit on it. Like we won't draft you for at least 2 years or something. Like, I don't know. Like, these large sweeping promises that Ukraine makes, a lot of them have come back to bite them in the butt. And I don't want to get into that, but oh boy. Like, no more promises, please. Like, if you're gonna have like a program, make it a timed program. Like, this program lasts 18 months or something. Yeah, because it's the same problem with their demobilizing, where the people made like this sweeping promise of, I will fight until the war's over, and then 2 years later they're like, I'm tired, I want to go home, which is completely reasonable, right? But this is why you have to have time limits on everything. Everything should have a time limit. Like, whether it's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, there needs to be light at the end of the tunnel. No sweeping promises. Anyways, I don't really have any more frontline news. There's some other news that I just want to talk about briefly because I don't really know that much about it, to be honest. But Dnipro got hit by a large Shahed attack last night that apparently damaged the electrical infrastructure. And a few days ago, Pavlohrad also got hit by a large drone attack that also damaged the electrical infrastructure. And both of these attacks left a whole bunch of people without power. But on the plus side, power is not as needed in Ukraine right now because it's a heat wave. What do you think of that? It's like 12 degrees today in Dnipro, and not Fahrenheit. It's 12 Celsius. It's actually very warm. So the electrical power is not as important because you don't need the heat. So it's very comfortable. So that's the one positive that we can spin out of that. Yesterday, there was this terrible story of civilians suffering really bad injuries, and leg amputations in this town of, I don't know how to pronounce it, Avdiivka, whatever. I don't know how to pronounce that, but basically, one guy was collecting firewood, and he stepped on a mine and it blew his leg off. His friend ran over to help him and stepped on the mine and blew his leg off. So that's a sad story, but it's a reality that Ukraine is going to have to live with for a very long time. Odessa got hit by attacked by a missile today. No, Exit, do you know anything about that missile?
Not particularly. I haven't heard a lot of information about it.
Yeah, I don't really
yet.
know. I just know that it happened, and I think it was shot down, and
I'm
the
pretty sure it
debris
was.
crashed into like a skyscraper.
Yeah. They have had a lot of Shahed attacks lately. And those attacks seem to be different in that either debris or the actual Shahed seem to be making contact with things more inside the city than we have seen in the past. Just that's my personal observation from what I'm hearing from other people. And I don't know exactly what that is, if it's just like Russia's aiming differently than they have before, or maybe there's something different about those particular style of Shaheds. I'm not entirely clear on this, but it does seem like they've had a little bit more damage lately than they were used to in the past. So it's not great. Definitely they've been targeted a lot lately.
That's more or less all the news I got to talk about. Is there any other last story you'd like to bring up? Okay, nothing. I think that's the stream. I think that's it. I'll be back on Friday with more stream. Maybe better news. I doubt it. Yeah. I don't know. So that's a goodbye. I guess thank you for everyone who came and listened, and thank you for Exit and Language Learner and Gick, who has been just sitting there listening to us the whole time, not talking at all.
He's like the quiet stalker in the corner.
Weird.
Those crazy European quiet stalkers.
Oh, there's another question. I have no answer to this. So but it's about the continued drone attacks of Ukraine into Russia. I honestly I have nothing to say about it. I just nod and say yes. There are attacks. I honestly I have nothing. I have no interesting takes on it. I have nothing to really say about it other than they sure do happen, don't they? Russia Moscow caught on fire today for some reason, and a MiG factory caught on fire. That's weird. Yeah, and their oil refineries caught on fire. Weird coincidences. A whole bunch of them all caught on fire. Weird. Anyways, we'll see you later.
Just on the oil refineries, I saw somebody ask in the comments earlier if like how much of the production was being taken out because of that. From what I have seen specifically, it sounds like some of the export abilities are delayed for certain periods of time. But generally, refineries and other loading facilities are set up so that they can be kind of segmented if something does go wrong. So if you hit a portion of that facility, it doesn't mean that the entire facility is offline, and they can recover from it relatively quickly. So it's great that that's happening, but it's probably not the level of continued effect that you're hoping for.
It's annoying though. I feel like death by 1,000 cuts.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I mean, like the other perspective of that is that the more often you do that, the more parts and other things Russia is going to need to make those repairs, at some point they aren't going to either be able to produce or import enough of that stuff to make those repairs, and it will change how effective they can be at their oil exports. It's just that that's like a longer time scale than you're probably hoping for when you watch one actual refinery catch on fire.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm gonna stop the stream now. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.